Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and with me once again is Abby from Life Work Balance. How you doing, Abby?
I'm doing well, Bill. It's nice to be here again. I'm excited to continue our conversation that we've started this year about how we can get people hired in 2025.
That's right. Yeah. So as Abby just mentioned, the title is Getting Hired in 2025. So basically, anything to do with careers, job interviews, resumes, networking, posted jobs, hidden jobs, all that kind of stuff. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And this is a interactive live stream. This is going out on Abby's channel and on my YouTube channel simultaneously. And if you are seeing this, and if you're watching it from either of those places, you should see some kind of a chat box or chat field where you can get in the chat and you can ask us questions, and we both see it. And we'll do our best to answer your questions and help you out. So while we're waiting for questions, hopefully to roll in, we had one issue that we'd like to kick off the discussion with, and I guess I'm going to introduce this. Right, we're going with my comment now. Of course, I closed my window that had the comment on it, but if you give me just 10 seconds, I think I can pull it back up here.
Yes.
This is something that I think will strike a chord with a lot of people. Here we go. This was the comment. It says, I have applied for over 200 plus jobs as a fresher, and it's depressing, and none responded. What should I do?
Yep. And so if you're watching, I guess I can't see exactly how many people are watching right now, but that's probably something that people have experienced when it comes to applying to jobs, especially jobs online. Maybe they haven't applied to 200 and heard back from zero, but they've probably applied to several and haven't had any response. So if this is something that you've experienced in the past, let us know in the chat, and we can kind of get a consensus of how often this happens to people.
Yeah, very common thing. I'm expecting that most job seekers will have some similar experience. They'll be able to relate to this. I think for a lot of people, it's more than 200 jobs. I think you can apply for 100 jobs in a day, certainly, if you really wanted to. Back in the day, if before like chatbots and stuff, if you were just sending out your standard resume to every job that you apply to without tailoring it, you could easily apply to 100 jobs in a day. So it's possible to apply for thousands before you hear anything back if you're doing it that way. But I think the standard thing that everyone's going to recommend is not to do that. Isn't that so, Abby?
Yes. So I would say you definitely want to have a strategy for your job search. Applying to 200 applications, and granted, we don't really know the exact time frame. Maybe this person has applied to 200 jobs in the last 2 months. That's still a lot of jobs, but I would recommend applying to probably 5. Maybe if you hit the jackpot with a perfect search, you can apply to more than that, but like 5 a day max, because you do want to spend some time tailoring your application, tailoring your documents. And I'm of the mindset that you should absolutely submit a cover letter with every application. I know several people who are close friends who are hiring managers who are like, I will never read a cover letter. But I'm of the mindset that if someone puts in the effort to submit a cover letter, I'm going to at least look at it. And I think your resume and your cover letter should be tailored directly to the position and the organization that you're applying to. And while that doesn't mean that you recreate the document every single time you're applying to a new job, it should take some time to strategically and effectively tailor that document or documents to the job that you're applying to.
Absolutely. I think that most job seekers, if you're doing the default thing, which is to respond to posted jobs online with an application of some kind, usually involving a resume, I think the first sort of decision everybody has that confronts them is, should I tailor my materials, my resume, my cover letter, and my application, or should I just go with the sort of standard template thing that I send everywhere, right? Yeah. And there's pros and cons of each, right? If you tailor it, then in theory, you might have a higher chance of getting a response from that job. But it's labor intensive, it's time consuming, and so you can't apply for the volume of jobs that you would be able to if you were just blasting out the sort of standard resume. So So it's like, I think a lot of job seekers, they're confronted with that decision. They don't really know what is the way to go for that. And like Abby said, I think most people, including both of us, would recommend that you go the tailored way rather than sending a sort of default resume or default cover letter to everything you apply for.
Yes, and it's very easy to tell what is general or generic or default versus what is tailored. And so someone named Jay just commented that they're using Glassdoor and Indeed, and that they try to tailor when it's possible. Now, one thing that I want to point out when it comes to websites like this, Indeed and Glassdoor scrape job postings from the internet, which means that there might be job postings on those websites that are not official. So this is how scamming can occur pretty easily. Glassdoor and Indeed can't necessarily verify and confirm that the job posting is legit if the person posting it is a legit person. And as a recruiter, I've had this happen to me as well on LinkedIn, where I've posted a job on my internal job board that is available for anyone to use. And then it got scraped and reposted on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, it was a whole process to try to get it removed. And I don't even know if it was removed. So I highly recommend that if you're using websites like Glassdoor, Indeed, and LinkedIn, that you always first check to see if the application is available on the company's website directly. This is also a benefit for the applicant tracking system that you're using when applying. So when it comes to Indeed, there's probably a identifier that lets the applicant tracking system know that you've come from an outside URL rather than directly from the website. They might give preference to people who have applied directly on their website versus people who have applied in that mass application process through Indeed. So I always recommend that you submit directly on the organization's website if it exists. There are some organizations that don't have the capacity or the budget to have their own internal applicant tracking system, and they'll then pay or use the free versions of Indeed or Glassdoor or even LinkedIn. And so sometimes it's not possible to apply on their website, but always check before you submit.
Yeah, I agree with that. Indeed, they're aggregators. They, like Abby says, they scrape the web, they crawl the web, they find job postings on other websites, and then they list them all on their website. So, like Abby says, that's a great tool. You can see a lot of jobs in one place. That's certainly good, but the potential for fraudulent job posts and other kinds of nefarious kind of things go up. So if you see a job posting on Indeed and it's for, I don't know, General Motors or something like that, whatever company, go to the General Motors website and then apply through the General Motors website where that job originally came from, right? There is a question here. How does one tailor a resume? So I'll start this off. I'll just say, well, you're going to customize your resume. And if you're wondering what changes you should make, if you look at the job posting and you look at the requirements section where it says we're looking for someone with this, and this, right? Well, one of the things you'd want to do is on your resume, you'd want to change your resume, or you change the version of the resume you send to these people for this job so that it mirrors what they said they're looking for. So if they said they're looking for this, and this, wouldn't it be great if they looked at your resume and the first thing that they saw was that you have this, and this, right? Bam, you look like a perfect fit, right? So that's what we mean about tailoring a resume. There's more to it, and I'm sure Abby can go into more if you would like to, but that's the general idea.
Yes. And so I recommend having two versions of your resume. You have your master version, which is everything you've ever done from a professional and educational perspective. Usually it starts once you graduated high school and you get your first real job. If you got your first real job while you were in high school, then you would include that as well. But just know that eventually that information won't ever be included on a resume, depending on how much experience you have, how many years of experience. In most cases, a resume should include no more than 15 years worth of experience. So 2025, going back 15 years, brings us to 2010. So anything older than 2010 probably shouldn't be included on a resume, just because there's so many changes in the industry and with technology and things like that. Sometimes it makes sense to include much older information. So you limit the amount of information you include on your resume. You should also make sure that the page number is limited. Many people will get really engrossed with how much experience they have, and they're really proud of all the things that they've done. And suddenly they're submitting a 4-page resume. You want your resume to be 1 page, 2 pages maximum. So 1 page is the best option because in most cases, the first time someone looks at a resume, they spend 6 seconds looking at it. That's not a lot of time. And so you want to make sure that you highlight the most relevant information that you have from your experience and your education. So you make the decision on if you're a good fit for the position and you meet the minimum and hopefully most of the preferred qualifications quickly. So if I'm a recruiter and I'm looking at a resume, I'm going to be looking for those minimum qualifications and some of those preferred qualifications. Ideally, it's on 1 page so I can quickly and effectively make that choice. If there's too much information, there's big chunks of text, lots of things for me to read, I'm just not going to put in the effort to read those things. So you want to tailor your resume to include some of the buzzwords, some of the phrases from the job posting. This doesn't mean that you copy and paste the entire job posting into your resume and leave it like that. But it does mean that you take your previous experience and you connect the dots for the reader about how your experience that you've gotten in the past from education, from volunteer experience, from paid work experience, etc., how that experience connects and will help you be successful in this new role moving forward. Now, that's not necessarily telling you exactly what to do and how to do it, but one of the keys that you can do, especially these days, is use generative AI to help you kind of come up with some ideas of tailored bullet points from your previous experience to this new experience that you're wanting to apply to. So you can use a program like Grok or ChatGPT or another generative AI platform. You can copy in your resume, you can copy in the job posting, and you can ask it to evaluate your resume and evaluate the job posting. And based on the two, to generate 10 to 15 bullet points per experience that you have that would be tailored bullet points for this new resume. So that's a quick way to get generative AI to do some of the legwork for you, but you absolutely have to make sure that you're reading what it puts out to ensure that it's accurate information. And you might need to tweak some of the things. I like to ask ChatGPT and other programs to create 10 bullet points that are quantitative or quantifiable, not quantitative, quantifiable data. I want it to include numbers, metrics, things like that. It's not going to be able to just generate the automatic numbers for me. So it's going to put in some placeholders. So you'd want to update things like that. So the long and short of it is make a tailored resume, 1 to 2 pages, and make sure that the bullet points that you include for your experience section are relevant to the job that you're applying to. The resume is for the reader, the person who's doing the hiring, the person who's doing the interviewing. It's not really for you. So even though there might be things that you're really proud of that you want to include on your resume, if it's not relevant to the job that you're applying to, don't include it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, someone else says here, like, "Hi, Bill, do you recommend to use ChatGPT to tailor your resume?" Yeah, like Abby was just saying, yes, I do. But it's like saying, "Do you recommend using Microsoft Word to do your resume?" Yes, it's a useful tool. Now, does that mean that you can just do a slapdash quick job with it and not put any real care into it and expect great results? No, you still have to do it intelligently. It's a great tool, but you have to use it correctly. So, like Abby says, at a basic level, you want to highlight what they said that they're looking for. At a more advanced level, you could use ChatGPT to do more complex things, like saying, automatically, I want you to scan this job posting, like Abby just said, and then I want you to take my resume, which I'm now giving you, and then rewrite it, like, reorder all the things and put emphasis on certain things and de-emphasize other things, so that all the stuff that they requested they're looking for, that appears very prominently on mine, so that it fits like a glove. And like what Abby was saying with bullet points. So I tried to do a demo of that live, like on the air. Like, I just created a throwaway resume and a throwaway job posting, and I did like the bare bones of it. It's actually a bit more complex when you actually have to do it. You have to put a little bit more time into it. I thought I could just do it in sort of like 5 minutes, but you got to put a bit more time. And then, of course, you want to proof everything that ChatGPT says before you just send it off, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure it's appropriate.
Well, and I would say kind of along those lines with that,
Hmm.
it's more, it takes a little bit more effort to create these like tailored documents. What will likely happen is that you'll have your master document that is everything, it could eventually be 20 pages long. You'll have this master document that you convert into a tailored resume, and then you'll find that you might start to reuse that tailored resume because you're applying to similar jobs in similar industries. So I just was working with someone last week actually who has a lot of experience, but they're wanting to change industries and they're interested in working in healthcare, tech, and nonprofit. So I recommended that they create 3 different tailored resumes, one for healthcare, one for tech, and one for nonprofit. Now, the documents themselves might look very similar, but some of those keywords and phrases and the bullet points they choose to use for each of those different resumes will be slightly different. They'll probably then use that healthcare resume, for example, and they'll tweak some of those words and phrases slightly for every job that they apply to, but it's not going to be a master rehaul every single time they apply to a healthcare related job. So on the front end, it will take some effort to create this tailored document. Once you get it created, then it will be much easier to make quick edits, quick updates, and then move on.
Yeah, like anything else, once you start doing this, you will get much more efficient at it very quickly. So, I mean, the first day where you apply to, I don't know, maybe 5 jobs, something like that, with using ChatGPT to tailor it, maybe the second day you'll be able to apply for 15. You know what I mean? Like you'll be able to get better at this as you go. My problem is I don't tailor a resume, as part of my regular thing. So I'm not very efficient at it. But the bottom line is use ChatGPT. Make a simple version of your resume in terms of formatting. That's what I would recommend. Instead of all these like text boxes and things all over, fancy graphics and stuff. It's very impressive to look at, but like, in terms of customizing your resume, just start off with like, the basic text resume, like Times New Roman, like almost like resumes used to look like 30 years ago. Like that, personally, that's what I would recommend. And then just simple. And then you can import it into ChatGPT. Here's my resume. Here's the job posting. Bam, rewrite it. It spits it out. You don't have to worry about redoing any fancy formatting, that kind of thing. And just force yourself to use it. And pretty soon you will get very good at it. And you'll see how powerful tools like chatbots are to do this stuff, and it will benefit you. We are falling a little bit behind with questions here. So before this gets too far,
Well, and
somebody
really
said,
quick, I just wanted to point
yep.
out, I just put in the chat, if anyone's interested, I actually have a free master resume template that is downloadable for anyone to use. I usually don't recommend using a template, but in this case, it is very minimal formatting and it's available. I think I have a Canva version of it. So if you prefer to use Canva, I have a Word version or a Google Docs version that you can download for free. So I've just put that in the chat if you're interested in just taking a look at it and seeing what that looks like.
Right on. So Christian says, thoughts on jobs that require exams. This is kind of stuff you would probably encounter, in the posted job market. This is all, entry level type stuff, I would imagine. I mean, I don't think it's common for people above the entry level to get exams and aptitude tests. Like, is that your experience, Abby? I mean, this is kind of like entry level stuff, right?
Yeah, I would say, there's reasons for this. For example, if I was applying to a job to work as an administrative assistant and I need to be writing documents quickly, sending emails quickly, they might want to test my like typing speed. So they might have me do a typing speed exam. Maybe I'm going to be working in a lot of spreadsheets and they're going to need me to have like true mastery of Excel. I might be able to subjectively say that I have mastery of Excel, but if I don't prove it before the hiring takes place, then it could be a disaster if I get hired into a job that requires it and I don't know how to use it. So if a job does require an exam, there's probably a reason for it. With the like caveat of sometimes employers will put you through hoops and there's not much requirement or like logical reasoning behind it.
And it can be humiliating. Let's be honest. It's like if you're a fully qualified whatever, and they say, "I'm sorry, we're going to need you to take a vocabulary test," or whatever kind
Yes.
of basic aptitude test. It's like it just shows that there's a disconnect there, and people don't understand possibly your qualifications, or the qualifications aren't really standardized or valued, or understood. So
Yes. Well,
it,
and I think a good example too is so when I was in college, I actually took a class that was exclusively on Excel and learned how to code within Excel and do all these things. And then I applied for a job that required me to do an Excel test, and I failed it. And it's because I wasn't doing things in the exact order that the test was expecting me to do it. I was doing it in a different order. So they can be a little bit, and maybe I didn't know what I was doing. There's always that caveat. But if it's not in the right order, sometimes the exams will get really finicky with that. I
that's
also
funny.
think there's a time and place for the exams.
There was that. Plus, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
No, no, I remember taking these things. I remember it being like, in my case, you have like a bachelor degree in something, and they're like, okay, well, we have to give you this test to make sure that you basically know how to tie your shoes, kind of thing. So, I mean, whatever. Listen, these are some of the things some of the hoops you have to jump through when you're going through posted jobs, and you're going in with lots of other applicants. I'm a
And
big
sometimes they're just
proponent of avoiding
sometimes,
all of that. Like, unless you're at the entry level stage, like if you're higher up, you can do networking and stuff, and you can avoid all of this. But
well, and
this,
sometimes these types of like exams are truly
hmm,
meant to just weed people out. Maybe
yeah,
we
yeah.
have thousands of applicants and we have people who, you know, don't want to spend the time to do the exams or don't meet the qualifications based on the results. Like it's an easy way to like cut people out quickly if they aren't willing to do it or if they can't pass it.
And I'm sure nobody cares about this, but a lot of times also those decisions are political, because nobody wants to take the responsibility for picking a candidate that ends up to not work out. It's very embarrassing. So what they do is they say, okay, let's everyone take a test, and then we'll just weed out the bottom. It's all marked on a curve, so we weed out whatever the bottom 70% of people are, and then that way you are removed from making an executive decision on what candidate. And therefore, if they don't work out, nobody can blame you. It's that type of situation. So, let's be honest. That's the source of some of these things. It may not necessarily be that the exam in itself has a lot of intrinsic value in, assessing anything really important.
Yep.
Um, let's get to some of these other ones here. Tomy D, just so you know, I got your notes here. I will look into it. There's some weird stuff on YouTube with people talking about that stuff. Sometimes their stuff doesn't show up, so I don't know. I'll look into seeing if there's any issues there. But sorry about that if that's what you're experiencing. You can always come to these career expert roundtable Q&As, and I can see your stuff just fine. Um, Anthony says something. How much does AI play in an initial resume review in terms of keywords? You'd be in a better position to answer that, I think, than I would, Abby.
Yeah. So in my experience, it's actually not that smart. You would think that the programs would be very like adept at like the different types of documents that might be uploaded and things like that. So the AI that is reviewing resumes at the beginning is really just scanning your document and comparing it to the job posting and maybe some other things that the hiring manager or the recruiter has plugged in on their end of things that they're looking for. I would say that there are either organizations that use this or don't. The ones that don't, you're not going to really be like impacted by it all that much because they're probably going to have a different system of evaluating people's applications before it gets to a person, like answers to supplemental questions. If you are using, or if the organization that you're applying to is using an applicant tracking system that evaluates your documents or your application ahead of time, then it is a pretty big deal. And it's because it has to rely on these keywords and phrases that you've added to your documents or you've added to your application to create this, alignment with the organization's post or job description or whatever it is that it might be evaluating it for. So it could make or break your application. I would say, regardless of if you are doing the keywords and, putting things directly from the job posting into your resume, you want to make sure it's in a single column format because these programs read your document like a book. So if you have two columns of information, like maybe one column is small on the side and it's like your contact information, your LinkedIn profile, some keywords and skills that you want to highlight, and then you have a bigger column that is all of your experience, it might combine the lines straight across and make just a gibberish output. So the biggest thing I highly recommend doing when you are applying online is use a single column resume so that there's no confusion when the AI or applicant tracking system is reading your document like a book.
Yeah, that's why I said what I said 5 minutes ago about sticking to formats like resumes used to look like 30 plus years ago. Just simple, no fancy text boxes or columns. Because if AI is reading it, it's one of these things where you're sending it in response to a posted job, and it's going into a applicant tracking system that's using AI to scan things as an initial filter. You want it to be as easy to read as humanly possible. A lot of the eye candy doesn't matter in that situation. It can be just, you could literally send in a text file almost, and it would, at least you'd be assured that there were no formatting issues of it reading your resume.
Yeah.
So simple is best,
Yes. Well, and even if you start to use AI to fill in your bullet points before you submit to a program, I imagine that they're going to get smarter at recognizing who's using AI versus who isn't using AI. And at the same time, I don't think it's going to limit you unless you blatantly plagiarize everything from the job posting into your resume. It's really, they're going to be looking for people who are putting in the effort to create these documents that are specific to the job that they're applying to. That not only demonstrates that you're willing to put in this extra effort, but it also demonstrates that you're really enthusiastic about the position and that you're intentionally applying to the job rather than just blasting out hundreds of applications as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I'm it's a thing where everything happens some of the time, right? For me, I would probably say keyword matching. Abby knows more about this than I do because she's been on the forefront of this for years. But just in my kind of maybe perhaps more limited experience, it's pretty dumb. Like you were saying, it just looks for the word. Do you have this word in your resume? How many times is it in your resume? Yep. And then it uses things like that to rank you in terms of a fit for the position,
Yep.
And the problem is that if they use some retarded terminology that you wouldn't use in your past, like the companies you worked for, maybe they didn't refer to things that way. Or in your industry, they use multiple terms to describe the same thing, So on your resume, you use one term. I did, I got 14 years hard hat experience, white hat experience. Now, maybe in certain industries, they would know that, oh, you're a white hat. That means you're a supervisor, So if this is going to someone in the construction industry, presumably they would know that. So you write that on your resume because that's how people talk in your industry. But the job posting was created by a recruiter who themselves don't work in construction. They work in HR. So they would write, we want 5 years supervisory experience, right? So even if you said white hat experience, it wouldn't find that as a match. It would say you're unsuitable. You don't match the requirements. If you said supervisor, I've been a supervisor for 5 years, that's a different word than supervisory experience. It may not match depending on how sophisticated the filter is. You know what I mean? So to maximize your chances of an automatic filter finding your resume to be a match, you would use the exact word. So if they say we're looking for someone with 5 years supervisory experience, you say, I have, say 8 years supervisory experience, and then it's an exact match. Yep. It's a stupid game, right? But unfortunately, these sort of technical things, they're obstacles, right? And if you don't know your way around them, you get filtered out, right? That's the unfortunate reality of this stuff,
And it just goes back to reiterate that you should not be creating your resume for you. You should be creating your resume for the person who's reading the document and even the computer system who's reading.
Absolutely.
So you don't want to waste your time putting things that you're really proud of on your resume that isn't going to matter in the long run when it comes to the review of your application.
Yeah, keywords are, if you're going to play this game and you're going to apply for posted jobs and go through what I call the official standard process for, hiring, where the first thing you encounter is that sort of automatic filter, right? You got to tune into some of these rules, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Amaze says, hi, any thoughts on stating job achievements in paragraphs versus stating responsibilities in bullet points on a resume? I'm going to let you take that one, Abby. I think that's kind of right up your alley.
Yep. So if you think of a recruiter or even a hiring manager reading a resume, you want to make your document as easy to read for these people as possible, which means bullet points. If I am spending 6 seconds looking at a resume for the first time, I'm going to glance over any big chunks of text. I'm going to be looking for the impactful bullet point statements. So I highly recommend that you don't put paragraphs on your document. You have a valuable piece of real estate with that one page of document, and you want to make sure you use it in the most effective way, which means making it as easy and as simple to read as possible for someone who is not going to be spending much time on it. So definitely, definitely bullet points over paragraphs.
Something I did years ago, and I this is just like personal anecdotal experience, so I don't know if I'm necessarily recommending this, but I remember like a million years ago, I would do like the resume and, Times New Roman,
Mhm.
and, but what I did was I did it on Microsoft Word. So you can like highlight words, like you would highlight it with a marker, right? And I would highlight the key things. So you would be able to just look at like the yellow highlighted text on the front page, and it would be bam, 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 like all the stuff they said they were looking for. So it was like, education, like the degree. Oh, here's the supervisory experience. Here's the skill that you were saying you wanted. Here's this other skill you were saying you wanted. And here's some other experience here doing this that you said you liked. So it's like bam, bam, bam. Now, at the time, I got lambasted by people for doing that. And then I also got praised from other people for doing that. So the jury was out at the time. What do you think of that, Abby? Just your personal opinion. Is that something you would recommend to people or not so much?
You know, I think it could be a really good idea depending on the role that you're applying to. And in most cases, I wouldn't recommend it because it's just some additional formatting on top of everything. And like I'm torn, in some situations, I'd be like, that's great. I know several hiring managers who would love it if resumes came to them with like bolded words or highlighted words to really like highlight the fact that they've got these skills or this education. My gut instinct is you want it as consistent and as clean as possible. And having that, yellow highlighting or whatever show up on the document is a shock to the system when you're used to seeing things that are clean, simple, and consistent. So you could stand out and you could stand out for good reasons or bad reasons.
Yep. It's nerve wracking either way. So what I would suggest to people is if that sounds like something you'd like to do, I would say try it. Try like some applications that way and try some applications the other way, and then see if there's any difference in the results you're getting,
Yep.
Um, what have we got here? Ahmed says, as someone looking for an entry level job, is it realistic to get a sponsorship visa entry level job, or is it hard? Um, I'm in the country I'm in, blah, blah, blah. This is like more of an immigration thing. Um,
Not my area of
yeah,
expertise. I have
me too.
very little experience with this. I would say it depends on the organization, though. If the organization in the job posting states that they're, you know, who it's open to, if it's open to anyone, or if it's open to specific countries of origin, things like that, then if it says specifically that they're willing to do sponsorship visas and things like that, then I would assume it would be relatively easy to get that. For an entry level job, I think it also depends on the organization. So it's not a clear answer to your question. It's all
Yeah,
the
there are people that specialize in that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Like there are resources. I think there's even YouTubers that
Mhm.
talk about that stuff because that's their main line. So I would
Yeah.
recommend you check those out.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put your comment right up on the screen there, Abby. So everybody check this out. Okay, for additional help with your resume with Abby. And there's a couple of things here. So these are in the comments, so you can click on the link.
Yep. And that one you just shared is to my Twitch stream. So I'm simultaneously streaming this to my YouTube audience as well as my Twitch audience.
Awesome. Right on. They're further and further reach.
Yeah.
Here we go. Asha says, what does the team expect during a panel interview? I would say the panel interview is pretty much exactly the same as a one-on-one interview. It's the same questions. The only difference is that they're going to come from different people. And the only challenge that I have found with like panel interviews way back in the day was keeping everybody's name and role straight in your head. So, if you're sitting across the table from like four people, knowing who they are, because you might want to tailor your answers, knowing the question is coming from. If it's an HR person, you might want to answer a certain way. If it's from like the CEO of the company, you might want to answer a different way. So, uh, being able to remember whose name and whose function. Now, the only thing that I'd have a recommendation for is something I think a lot of job seekers should have is a business card. And considering how cheap and simple it is to make these days, long story short, if you have a LinkedIn profile, the header of your LinkedIn profile, like your account, put that on a business card. So it has your name, your tagline, maybe a professional picture of you, like a headshot, and then your contact information. And then, when you go to a job interview, like a panel interview, and you're being introduced to several people all at once, you can just take out your business card and hand your business card to these people. And that's a cue for them to hand you their business cards. So you see exactly what their name is. You see exactly what their title is. And then if you sit down at like a table, at a conference table or something, and you're across from several people, you can put those business cards down in front of you and like align them to the people. So you could see their card right in front of the person. So it allows you to use their names and allows you to know who you're speaking to. If you can do research before you get to the job interview as to who you're going to be interviewing with, if they've given you the names of these people, go and look them up and just get an idea of like what their background is and what their role is. So if you go down there and you know that, okay, I'm talking to, John, and John is the hiring manager, and I know that John has a strong background in this particular area, and I have some background in that area, then I can maybe speak to, I could use examples from that area because I know that John will understand because he's from that area, or something like that, right? Other than that, I think it's the same as a regular one-on-one interview.
Yeah, and really, I believe that the purpose of panel interviews is to get interviews done in a more effective way, more quickly. So if you had to interview with these four people and you had to sit, in an hour or even 30-minute interview with each of them separately, that's a lot of time for you and a lot of time for the organization to spend on it. It's much easier to coordinate schedules and get everyone in the same room for one interview than it is to do all of those different things. And my recommendation is to bring notes to an interview, like have a notepad or something with you. And if you don't have business cards to hand out and exchange during the process, what I like to do is have my notes in front of me. And as each person introduces themselves, I write them in the order they appear in the room. So then I can quickly glance at my notepad and say, oh, Shelly is here, John is here. And then I, have basically on my piece of paper, identified them in the same sitting structure that they're in person.
Absolutely. That's a great way of doing it. Let's see here. Tommy says, should you even consider applying on LinkedIn or Indeed or any of those sites? What would you say to that, Abby?
Yeah. So I always recommend first checking to see if there is an organization specific page for applications. And if there is, always apply there. But like I mentioned earlier in our stream, there are some organizations that just don't have the infrastructure to have their own applicant tracking system. So they'll use platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed instead of one that's on their website. So I do think you should have that as an option. I don't think it should be your only option.
Yeah. I agree, basically. When there is a gap in experience, what do you recommend? So you got a work gap. That's a whole thing. That only really applies if you're applying to posted jobs. I don't really think that's any kind of issue if you're, doing direct outreach to companies or you're doing like networking or of any method of networking. It's just basically if you're talking to recruiters, because I believe recruiters have been trained to view that as a source of risk. You weren't working for a period. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe you're going to be honest about that reason. Maybe you're not. We don't know. So we're going to regard you as a higher risk employee for having that work gap.
Yep. And I actually have 2 videos. I posted it below in the chat on career gaps. And my biggest piece of advice to handle career gaps is to not bring it up unless it's brought up by the interviewers. And so what I recommend doing is instead on your resume, which is a tailored resume, you title your experience section relevant professional experience. And by titling it relevant professional experience, you're basically sending this like subliminal message to the reader that you have other experience. You just didn't include it on your resume because it's not relevant to the job that you're applying to. Even if you have a gap where you were unemployed, maybe that can just be kind of glossed over because you aren't including non-relevant information on your resume. The other thing that you can include is any experience that was professional in nature, even if it wasn't paid. So let's say that for some reason you were unemployed, but you volunteered with an organization or you like engaged in some other activity that you can quantify as professional experience. You can always include that on a resume. And when you call it professional experience as a recruiter, I'm not really caring if that was paid experience versus unpaid experience. If you had to show up in a professional capacity, you had to engage in time management, professionalism, communication, conflict resolution, all of those things. Those are skills that still will help you be successful in this job moving forward.
Yeah, the key is to not appear idle during that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So volunteering, training, education, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Go out and take a quick couple of courses, and then you can say without lying that, hey, I spent that time, boning up on, whatever it was. I was interested in this. I wanted to add that to my professional skills. And so I went and I did. I essentially went back to school, and then I got that knowledge, and now I'm ready to rejoin the workforce or, whatever, something like that. Just have a plausible explanation for it is always good. This thing just advanced on me again. So
I
I'm
see.
looking for the next question here.
Yeah, it was from SS up above.
Okay.
And they said, I took one of those exams Thursday that had nada to do with the position offered. And I saved a screenshot in case anyone thinks the customer service rep used to have a civil engineer degree.
That sounds like they messed up.
Yeah. And it sounds like lines got crossed and someone made a mistake on their end.
It's that caliber of people you're dealing with there, SS, maybe. I'm not sure.
Gosh. And that's what makes this like interview process so infuriating. Like they can't even get it right on my end. And then they're going to make judgments about me and if I'm a good fit for the position.
It's demeaning is what it is. Yeah. Sometimes it's unintentional. Sometimes you have to sort of just make allowances. Other times it's just people being grossly incompetent or just plain rude, disrespectful, and unfortunately that's an element of this. And everyone, I imagine, will encounter this in some measure, in some way, shape or form, eventually, if not immediately. So, that's part of the territory, unfortunately.
And if I were in this person's position where I took an exam and it was completely unrelated to the position that I was applying to, I would actually also reach out to the recruiter or whoever coordinated that with me and say, I just want to make sure that the exam that I took was the correct one because I don't want to be like rated lower than I was as a civil engineer, which is not the position I was applying to. So I would always follow up, and that might even be a test on their part. Like, does this person recognize that this is not the correct information? And are they willing to reach out and say that there was a mistake? Like, there's so many ways.
Oh, the mind games.
Oh,
there are 9 levels of this stuff. Yeah. Going on.
Yes.
We don't want someone that's just going to blindly, demurely take this kind of treat. We want someone who's going to kick up a fuss about it and, demand that we get it right or something. And that way we know we're dealing with some kind of assertive young go-getter or something.
Well, maybe they say, oh, this did require an exam or an assessment, but we're not going to make you take it since you went through this process. And they'll like maybe even skip you over that process.
There we go. Right. To save face.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the ugly side of this stuff. Tommy D says, as a graphic designer, it has not been easy landing a job. It seems like recruiters and companies are just posting jobs. There are sometimes 2 jobs in one for a designer, and I've applied to many. I think it continues on here. Jobs I'm qualified for, but barely any reply. And I worry that just because I don't meet certain unfair criteria and my resume gets tossed, even though I'm qualified. Yeah, that's all part of the magic of this process, unfortunately. They have very specific wants, wills, and needs, and you have to speak to what they're looking for, even if what they're looking for is just out to lunch, just completely someone was just off the rocker when they wrote those requirements, you know?
Well, and if that's the case, do you even waste your time applying? If you know that this is unrealistic, that it seems like it's multiple jobs in one, there might be people who are like, I can buckle down and do this for 2 years, but I don't want to. If I'm reading a job description and I'm like, this seems like this is going to be way more than 40 hours of work. They probably have very high expectations. This is not going to be the right fit for me. I'm not even going to apply. It's easy to say that when I have, my income and all that stuff. And if you are desperate for a job, you might just be willing to take whatever is available. But there are some red flags out there that you want to keep in mind and then use it to inform if you're going to choose to apply or not.
Yeah, like what we've been saying so far in the last couple minutes is probably pretty depressing. What I would say is that this is a great if this is what you're encountering, okay, Tomi, if this is what you're encountering, this might be a great opportunity to explore the world of networking, okay? That means all the jobs that are out there, but they're not posted because they don't need to post them, right? I talk about this extensively on my channel. Abby plugged something, so I'm going to plug my thing. I have a course called Get Hired where I talk about how introverts and stuff can do this. Now, listen, don't take this from me. Go and do your own research, but something like 80% of all the jobs that are out there are not posted. So all the jobs you're seeing that are posted, all of those jobs that you can see, that's only 20% of all the jobs that are actually out there right now. Okay. So if you're looking at the jobs they're posting and they're like this, like they're just silly, people obviously don't know what they're asking for. They don't understand what they're, like how that industry even works or whatever. If that's the case, maybe this is a great time to learn about the networking stuff. And probably where I would start with that is direct outreach, learning how to do direct outreach to organizations. You don't worry about posted jobs. You just think in terms of what company you'd like to work for, what employers are around you that have potential to employ someone like you with your skills, and then contact some individuals at that organization and say, look, if ever you're looking for someone with these skills, I solve this problem and I'm great at this. If ever you're looking for that, please let me know. I'd love to work for you guys. I know you guys do great work. If they're looking for someone, they would rather investigate leads like that than just post it publicly and get 1,000 strangers that you're always unsure of their motivations, and how dedicated they are. So this could be an opportunity to investigate that stuff.
Yep. And I would say that more jobs are being posted now because laws are changing. Like, for example, I live in Colorado in the United States, and we, in 2021, passed a law called the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, which required there be competitive process and that salaries be posted. And so the competitive process is not black and white either. It just means that there has to be opportunity for people to apply. So that means that the jobs either will be posted online or they might be posted physically inside the building to, meet this competitive process requirement. So there might be small organizations that don't have the capacity to post online. So they might just be doing word of mouth. They might have a sign up in their business that says they're looking for people. They might not even be advertising that they're looking for people. So you want to use your resources to start to identify organizations that you could work for that will be good fits for you, both from an organizational perspective as well as from an actual work perspective. And so I see Tomi had another comment come through, which was basically, how do you deal with job postings that are asking you to do 2 different jobs in one? And I would say along those lines, if you think that it is going to be, all of these responsibilities, all of these things kind of combined into one job, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be realistic, you either don't apply or you are going to ask some hard questions during the interview process as well, because it's a conversation. Not only are they evaluating you as an interviewee to determine if you're a good fit for the position and for their organization, but you're interviewing them to make sure they're a good fit for you too. So one of the things that you could say, and this is just off the cuff, I don't know exactly if I would word it this way, but it would be along the same lines of, I noticed that this role has various responsibilities that seem like it spans 2 different types of jobs. Can you describe to me the expectations of time commitment for each type of task or role that I would be doing? And so ask them to clarify during the interview process. And then if they're like, oh, don't worry about it, we'll just make it work, and they're really laissez-faire or nonchalant about it, red flags would be going off for me. If they instead were saying, yes, we actually expect that you'd be spending 25% of your time working on these specific projects with this specific role or goal in mind, then you would be spending the other 75% of your time working on this. Then you can say, okay, they have a plan. They know that there are maybe two unrelated areas that will converge with this role, and they have a plan for how I'm going to be splitting my time between the two roles.
Yeah, like, and maybe I'm being kind here, but if it's a smaller organization, they might have this position open. It's a jack of all trades. Like, they don't have enough work for just purely this role, and just, have a whole other position for purely that role. You might have to be a bit more of a generalist, and that's what they're looking for. It's not in itself, it's not a stupid ask. Like, a lot of small companies, you have to wear multiple hats, and that's just the reality. But it could be a tremendous opportunity if they're smaller, and you're the graphics guy or something. If they're growing, you could end up being in charge of the graphics department by the time it's all over. So, I mean, you never know. The thing is to have an open mind and go down there and see what they're looking for. And you may not understand everything that their particular situation, but just have an open mind and look at it. Yeah. And the other thing is, Abby said a few things I wanted to mention, like the rule that you guys have in Colorado, and okay, that's great. Where I am, they don't have laws like that, but that's fine. But at the end of the day, imagine you're a hiring manager, you need some help, and you need another person to come on board. Would you hire the person that has reached out to you and that has communicated very professionally to you, and maybe you've even met, and they impressed you with how professional they acted, and how charismatic they were, and how enthusiastic they seemed, and how knowledgeable they seemed? Or would you take applicants that you received from like a posting on the internet? It's just like a pile of resumes. You don't know these people. You don't know how serious they are. You don't know anything about them. Even if the job is posted publicly, you'll still favor the person that maybe you've met, or that someone has met, that someone you trust at work because you've worked with them for 10 years, and they're saying, yeah, I met this person and they seem great. You'd probably give them a try, or investigate them first before you go to that generic sort of pile of resumes. So it always makes sense to kind of look into this kind of thing. Usually people don't start here. They start like, applying to posted jobs. That's the default thing. But as we get further on in our careers, we learn that like networking and direct outreach and stuff is a definite thing. So that's where people end up.
Yep, I would completely agree. And think of it for yourself, maybe not from a hiring perspective, but like a restaurant suggestion. If I am going to go to a restaurant, I probably will, talk to a friend or someone that I know closely who can recommend something for me. And I'll probably trust their recommendation that the food at this place is good, rather than just like blindly showing up and hoping for the best. So
or taking a recommendation from some random person somewhere in the world that you saw on the internet,
Right. And while that does happen, that's why referrals are so powerful, because even if I don't know someone personally, I might trust their input for this. So that's why, even if you were like networking with someone on LinkedIn, you never meet them directly, but you do have some sort of basic communication with them, and they can refer you to a job, that still has more impact than you blindly applying to an application or a job and having no connection to the organization whatsoever.
Yeah. So the more of these kind of techniques you learn, just amplifies your chances of success. Where were we in this?
I think Serious Cat is our next comment.
Okay. I've
say,
lost complete track. We got something nice from Amaze there.
Yep.
And then you posted a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
Is this old or is this new? Am I way back in the queue?
So you're getting close. You're getting close. Serious Cat is coming up next.
Here we go. Okay.
Yeah. So how do you handle panel interviews when one or more of the participants have their camera turned off? You just continue the way that it is. From someone who has coordinated interviews in the past, I would hope that the recruiter or the hiring manager, whoever it is, would clarify expectations around that for people. But it's very possible that this person has their camera off and they are not really even paying attention. they're sending emails or doing other things. It's very possible that they are having like a sick day where they are like feeling awful, but they need to be in this interview. So they've got their camera turned off because they don't look or feel their best. So there's a lot of options and things that could be going on. And I would say handle it the way that you would handle it in any other situation, if they had their camera off or not.
That, or you could instantly get offended, fly off the handle, cast aspersions as to their questionable parentage. That always goes down great too.
Oh, yeah.
No, Abby's right. I mean, look, in a perfect world, people would be courteous and they would realize that the respectful thing would be to have your camera turned on. It shows that you're more attentive, shows that you're more invested, you're taking it seriously. If this is like a remote thing and we're doing it all by teleconference. But a lot of the times that's not what we see. We see people just doing whatever is most convenient for them, regardless of maybe how welcoming or hospitable it is. So listen, you just got to roll with it and do your best. And, if it turns into a callback and it goes somewhere, great. If it doesn't, then maybe it was a signal that, they weren't really that great to work with in the first place.
Yeah.
Anthony says, thank you both for your time. All the best for those seeking employment. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, Anthony. CRS, do you have any key advice for negotiating a deal after you get an offer? What do you think of that?
I think that nothing is set in stone until you've signed the offer paperwork.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing matters until you sign a piece of it. And even then, there's still risks. There's no guarantees, I mean, I'm sure, Abby, you can tell stories of people that have signed offers. Then they were all set to show up at work, or maybe they did show up at work on their first day, only to find that they have no job anymore. Maybe the company was downsizing or something. I mean, there's no guarantees. So, there's really no end point where it ends, right?
Right. Well, and again, like they could also rescind their offer.
Yeah.
So until the paperwork is signed, nothing is formal. I would say for sure you want to negotiate your salary, regardless of where you are in the process. The times I've heard this type of question come up is like maybe you've given a range of a salary that you're willing to take at the very beginning of the process, but then you learn more about the position and you think that the salary needs to be higher for you to accept the role moving forward. And that's also acceptable to do. So I highly recommend that you negotiate something that feels reasonable to you based off of what's going to be required for the position and the role and your experience that you bring. I think the key advice when it comes to this is not taking less than what you're worth and knowing that you have some power in the situation. And if they say no, they say no. There might be other things to negotiate as well. That's not just exclusive to salary. Maybe there's like some other compensation things like retirement contributions, or maybe you can get a higher accrual of PTO or start with a bank of PTO versus other things like that. But I would say if you're not comfortable with what they've offered you, you should negotiate.
Yeah, it's a huge topic. Like there's a lot to unpack here. The short version is basically negotiating is about having options, right? So if you have only two options here, unemployment or this job, you really don't have a lot of power. And if you make a counter offer, you always risk them saying, sorry, no dice, and, offer rescinded. Like that's the risk, right? Now, if you want to be confident, there's a couple of things. You have to, first of all, know what your position is. So if you have more than two options, unemployment, this job, or something else, right? Maybe you have other offers in a perfect world, or maybe you have a whole ton of interviews lined up in the next week, coming weeks with all kinds of other companies. Those are there's something else you have. It's an alternative, right? Maybe you're in a job and you're working, you're gainfully employed and you're looking for something better and you've gotten an offer, right? So you could always stay where you are, right? That's another option. So it's about knowing what makes sense for you to take and what doesn't make sense, right? Now, If you already gainfully employed or you have a competing job offer, then you can afford to say, well, look, I'm going to need X. I'm going to need X amount of money or whatever conditions, and it doesn't matter how you say it or how you phrase it. The key thing is that's what you are going to ask for, right? Now, when it comes down to actually, interacting with these people and having an exchange, usually what makes people more amenable to working with you is if you give and take. So if you just sit there and demand more, I need more vacation days, I need more sick days, I need, better benefits, I need more salary, I need a signing bonus, and I need, profit sharing. I want to be part of the profit sharing program, whatever. They're probably not going to want to acquiesce to that. But if you say, look, in my current job, I get 3 weeks vacation a year. Now you're giving me 2 weeks vacation. I'm taking a step down, but you know what? I'm enthusiastic about working for you guys. So you know what? That's fine. That's fine. I'll take that. Right. But if you could pencil in this number, that's what I need. And then you got a deal kind of thing. So it's like, you're willing to give some stuff. You're willing to be flexible on a few things. Just on a personal level, that usually makes people want to work with you because they feel that like, you're not just stepping all over them, that, it's more of a give and take thing and you're working with them and you're a team player and there's no red flags about the fact that you're playing hardball with them. But that's the end. At the end of the day, what alternatives do you have to this offer? That's really what it comes down to. If you have no other alternatives, you really don't have a lot of power to negotiate because any bluff you make, you can expect that they will call your bluff, and that can leave you with nothing. So just that's the reality of what's going on here.
Yep. And I would say that most employers are expecting some level of negotiation during the process. And so you want to be prepared with your justification as to why you are asking for a higher rate of pay or why you're asking for these additional benefits, more than just, I feel like I'm entitled to that. So you want to make sure that you kind of explain the market research that you've done, how similar organizations have higher rates of pay for similar types of work. You want to be able to justify your reasoning behind it. And so I would recommend that if you get an offer, that you respond to that offer and say, thank you so much for this. Would you mind if I take a couple of days to evaluate it? Like basically you want to say that you want to review it and then you can come back with a follow-up. Ideally, they give you a number and you can work with that number. And there's some give and take.
Yeah, you can certainly do that. And that would make things a little bit more pleasant. I got to say, though, I'm a big fan of, you don't need to justify. If you need something, you need it. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to justify yourself to these people or anyone else.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Which is why I think it's important to be prepared for the justification, but you don't have to provide that up front.
Yeah, like it might go easier if you take Abby's approach, and maybe, but at the end of the day, you see, I see a lot of people thinking that they have to come up with like they have to be able to persuade the employer that, oh no, you should give me this because it's fair. And, it really isn't the situation. Like they want to get you for as little as possible. You want to get the job for as much as possible. And there really is no justification. There is no, sort of absolute sort of standard or scale for like, what you would refer to it. Just, I would like this. And, if someone calls you on and say, well, we don't do that. Like you could make any logical argument you want, but the response can always be, well, I'm sorry, we don't do that. It's like, okay, well, see ya, you know what I mean? That's why at the end of the day, you just need to know what makes sense to you, and you need to have alternatives so you understand like, what to ask for and what not to take. You know what I mean? It really doesn't matter what people think. This is not about persuasion. It's about simply knowing your position. And if they don't agree with you, that's fine. They don't have to agree with you. It just has to make sense for both parties.
Yep.
So where are we here? Tommy D.
Yeah, we answered that one.
Okay.
So the next one.
Maybe this is this moving on me? Like it always seems to. Yeah, I think as people give more comments, the feed keeps moving up. That's what's throwing me off because I'm not seeing it move. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, so it looks like Asha says, for clarification, it's a virtual panel interview with the director and 5 other team members. Is it okay to carry a notebook for a virtual panel interview? Yeah, I think it's okay
Absolutely.
to bring notes to any interview. And the way I like to think of it is like this. If I'm going to show up in my role, so let's say that I get the job, to a meeting, they're going to expect me to be prepared for that meeting and then also to likely take notes so that I can take action after the meeting. If I don't demonstrate those behaviors in the interview, it's not necessarily going to be a red flag, but it's not going to harm me if I show up with notes, prepared, take notes, follow up with, people's correct names and emails and all that stuff after the interview. So I think bringing notes to an interview, regardless of if it's in person or virtual, is 100% acceptable.
Yeah, like if this is a physical interview and you're face to face with people in a panel interview, absolutely, like put down papers and stuff in front of you. You would want your resume, you would want the job posting, you would want notes for like maybe questions to ask, maybe a summary of the employer, like the company or whatever. There's like a bunch of things that you would have with you, and including like some blank paper, like Abby said, so you can write down notes. Now, I would not take a device. No phones, no tablets. We're talking like plain old school paper in a folder,
Yep.
because there's a bunch of issues with like plonking a tablet or a phone, smartphone onto the table, in like a real interview, because people don't know, like, are you recording them? Are you distracted? You're like, maybe you're looking at the time the whole time, or maybe you're waiting for texts or other things, or, some kind of distraction. Like there's all kinds of issues. So when we say take notes, we're talking like old school pen and paper, pencil and paper.
Yep. And I would even say, like, if you're virtual, say, like, I've just got my notepad right here that I'm going to take some notes on, and like show it to them, and then, so when you're looking down, you can write. And then, I'm just role playing right now, pretending that you're writing your notes and then looking at the camera and nodding and then taking some more notes and letting them know ahead of time, I've got my notepad right here. So I'm going to be taking notes on things throughout the interview.
Do the one finger to interrupt someone. Like, I'm just going to take notes. And then you plonk down like an inkwell, quill pen, a blotter, and some parchment on the table. There you go. That's how you know it's big leagues.
Yes.
We have Danielle says, I'm completing my 2-year instrumentation technician program. Can I, and how do I apply my hands-on classroom knowledge as experience on my resume? I'm just trying to parse the grammar.
Yep. So I'm thinking, can I, and how, if I can, do I put my classroom knowledge as experience on my resume? So if your education and like certification process is within the last 3 years, then definitely include like the graduation date and all that stuff on there, or anticipated date on there. And then you can also include relevant courses and relevant projects as like sub bullets or whatever beneath that education. So I include sometimes that if I'm applying to a job, I might sometimes include the classes that I've taken that are relevant to the job that I'm applying to, or the projects that I've worked on that are relevant to the job that I'm applying to. I just worked with someone who's in the process of finishing up their PhD, and I recommended that they actually put their PhD candidacy as an experience section on their resume rather than just underneath their education section, because they are working as a teaching assistant. They're mentoring and teaching other students. They're leading groups. They're, doing research, and they have to show up in this very professional way. So you can either choose to add relevant courses or projects underneath the education specifically, or you can kind of add your own professional experience section for that work.
Yeah. I mean, if you've done group work, like any kind of interaction with other people, that's a huge goldmine for experience, for stuff to talk about. Because let's pretend that, during the course of your 2-year technician program, there were some group activities. You had to get together with 6 other people and do an assignment or a project or something. It's like perfect, because when they say, if you've never had a career job before and they get you in a job interview and they say, well, it seems like you don't have any experience of this. And you say like, well, I led a team doing this. We kept it on time, on budget, whatever. I have experience resolving conflicts. We had a lot of different personalities in these groups. And in order to get them to work together smoothly and sort of accomplish a goal together, and so that we all succeed, it required a bit of diplomacy and a bit of communication between people and like this kind of stuff. If you've ever had issues with a course, maybe you're having problems in the course, you sought out the instructor one-on-one and said like, look, I'm independently going to my instructor under my own initiative. I'm getting clarification on instructions. I'm getting additional help as required. And then I'm doing the work, the extra work to catch up or whatever. And then I'm crushing it and I'm getting good marks, so it shows initiative. It shows the ability to seek help when you need it, the ability to clarify things when you need it. That stuff is gold. Like, you're looking for people to do things under their own initiative. So any of those experience, like Abby can speak more about how you would write that on your resume, like these kind of things. But like in the interview, when they ask you about these things, it's like, you've got actually got a ton of experience that is directly relevant to working in a job, because that's the kind of thing that they want you to do in a job. Right. And
Yep.
you've done it all already.
And I would say, if you don't have the ability to work directly with someone like me, you can also use your workforce center, which should be a free resource if you're in the United States. If you don't have access to a workforce center, then there's also the generative AI. So talk to it like a person, talk to it like you would Bill or I, and say, I am currently completing this program. I have these experiences. Help me create bullet points that I can add to my resume. Help me create a list that I can add to my education section in my resume, and just see what it creates for you, and then go from there.
Yeah. Thank you to John. Thank you to Tomi. Tomi's got some kind of question there.
I sent her a follow-up, or sent them a follow-up afterwards.
Okay.
So then, this next person says, should one start a business to gain experience that way, then land a job?
Typically, no.
No,
A lot of employers don't like when you have startup or small business like freelancing, because the problem there is that, yes, first of all, you and I know that this is incredible experience. The problem is that they're questioning your loyalty. If you had a choice between doing your own thing that makes money or working for an employer under their terms, under their thumb, most people are going to choose their own thing. That's where their loyalty really lies. So they're worried that, if they employ you, they're going to be priority 2 for you, and you're going to be doing your own stuff. And that's where their concerns are.
That you can't work with other people. Like, oh, this person can't hold a job because they don't have people skills. So they started their own business. There's all these like things, biases that come into play.
Yeah. It's a stupid way of looking at things, but that's what we encounter. So
I would also say, like, if you are in a place where you feel like you could start a business and have success with it, do it.
Yeah.
Why not?
Absolutely.
There's also the option of just really buckling down and hustling, and maybe getting a job that provides you with a consistent paycheck that you show up to regularly as this really consistent experience, that you can then also have your side hustle that you build and you maintain and grow. I would say that if the thought is, I want a job, but I'm going to start my own business first to then get that job, that seems backwards to me. It seems like there's other avenues to go about to do that.
Yeah, usually the progression is the other way. You sort of get inside like a big company, you learn how an industry works, you see it on the inside, you get sort of the lowdown of, you network with all the people in it and stuff like that. And then you jump out and you form your own business. And a common thing to do is to take advantage of all the connections and all the knowledge you gain from being on the inside, thanks to some larger employer.
Yep.
It's basically about you have a lot of value. And when people get jobs, they are going through an intermediary to turn your value into cash, right? So that's what your employer does. Your employer, concerns himself with, like, we're going to turn your value into cash. Now they do that, and then they make this much cash, and then they give you this much of it, right? So if you learn how to do this directly, you might not be able to make this much cash, but you can make this much, but you keep all of it, right? So, it's an incredible skill to learn. And ironically, in my experience, people that have small business experience and stuff like that, they make great employees because their decision making abilities are really tuned in to what makes sense for the business. They understand what's important and what's not. And so it's incredible experience, but it's not perceived like that, at least through standard HR channels.
Yeah. I actually had a boss who wanted each person on their team to be an intrapreneur and have that entrepreneurial mindset that they applied internally in the organization, and found that people who had that entrepreneurial spirit, even though they were working for an organization, ended up being much more innovative, creative. They, initiated change. They were willing to challenge the status quo and do all of these things. So there's certainly a benefit to having that
It's great
entrepreneurial.
when you can tie that to compensation too.
Yes,
All of a sudden you see
absolutely.
employees like come to life
Yep.
and be
Yep.
very productive.
Exactly.
Let's see if we can get through. We've got like about 6, or no, we've got more than that comment. Let's see if we can speed this up and get through some of these. Okay, Amaze says, would you recommend following up with the hiring manager after some silence, or would it look desperate? Doesn't matter how it looks, follow up.
Yep, absolutely. And I would say follow up, send a follow up email after every interview, no matter what, within the first 24 hours, thanking them for the opportunity, expressing your enthusiasm, things like that. If you then don't get any response to that, or you don't hear anything from the hiring manager or the recruiter, my recommendation is following up in 3 business days. And some people are like, wait a whole week. But I'm like, the hiring process can sometimes move really quickly. And maybe something just fell through the cracks, or maybe something happened where they had to divert their attention elsewhere. I think 3 business days is the amount of time I would wait before I sent a follow-up email. And then I would send one more follow-up email if I didn't get any response. And then I would take that as a no, and I would move on.
It should never look desperate if you know what to say.
Yep.
Right. There's no harm in saying, listen, hello, I'm just following up to see if there was any, news or any movement or any developments on with this position or with this opportunity. If you should ever need any more information from me, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much. Just very, very simple. There's nothing desperate about it. It's a perfectly legitimate request, and it's phrased professionally. So that's all you got to do.
And it demonstrates your persistence and perseverance that it's important for a job. Let's say that I'm going into sales and I get silence from the customer that I'm trying to acquire, and then I just don't follow up. Like, that's not showing and demonstrating that I have this persistence to seal the deal and do all this stuff. So I think that following up, showing your persistence, doing it in a professional way will always look better than just going along with the silence.
Absolutely. Serious Cat, I'm concerned my recent job history appears to show job hopping, working at 4 places in the past 5 years. Is there a way to structure a resume that doesn't highlight chronological experience? I don't think that's necessarily that big of a problem. If you were changing jobs every 3 months, that would be job hopping. But like 4 and 5 years, that's not that bad.
No, I would agree. And I would say that it's becoming very common for people to switch jobs frequently. Like every year makes a lot of sense. And a lot of employers are getting used to this happening. So it's no longer a red flag. If it was every 3 months, that would be a bigger red flag.
It's a trend that started in, I think, 1950s. I think every decade, the length of stay of like employees is shortened and shortened. The
highest turnover for the organizations that I've worked with has been 1 year. At that 1 year mark, that's the highest percentage of employees turning over.
And COVID drove that forward quite a bit.
Yep.
Right. There was a lot of disruption there.
Yep. And so I would say if you absolutely don't want to use chronological experience, you could always do more of a functional resume, which is basically where you list like your skills and then the different areas that you've acquired those skills. But I would say more recruiters and hiring managers are expecting a traditional resume, which is in reverse chronological order. So I would stick to that unless you absolutely must change it to functional. But I don't think 4 places in the last 5 years is anything to be concerned about.
Yeah, I agree. Another question. So Tommy says another question. When is it okay to walk from a job lead? I applied for a role in a fit for what? In a role in a fit for, I had a connection call with one of the people that works for HR, and it was a good conversation. But did you understand that so far before I move on?
I think so. So it sounds like this person like applied to it quickly. they had a connection call with someone from HR. It was a good conversation, but then there was no updates. Then they said that they were just getting their application reviewed. And then if we move forward, we won't notify other applicants, but that really made that person mad. I would say you are in a position of power when you are applying to jobs. You can either choose to apply to them or not apply to them. And then you can choose to continue to engage in the process or not engage in the process. And if
They
you
have the perfect right to hire who they want. You have the perfect right to apply to them or not, and
Yep.
you can accept their offer or rescind it. We all
Yep.
have our
And
rights.
if you are going through the process and you're just getting the feeling that this isn't a good fit or you're not liking the way it goes and just the gut instinct is telling you to move on, then I would say respectfully shut that door. You
Yeah.
don't need to burn the bridge. You don't need to implode the relationship because you may want to come back to it at some point. And they probably have some way of identifying if you've been a part of a process in the past. But I would say, upon, further consideration, I've decided to withdraw my application. And you can just leave it like that. You don't have to give them any reasoning. You don't have to do anything, but let them know that you're withdrawing your application and move on.
Yeah, I don't think you need us to tell you that there are some bad employers out there, people posting jobs and they're a nightmare to deal with and they're not even serious. And, it might be a lucky escape. They might be just looking to exploit people. So, I mean, don't worry about it. Just do your best. And if you're getting a bad vibe for it, move on, and like I said earlier, if you take into account like the hidden jobs, there's plenty more fish in the sea. There's a lot of opportunities out there. You may not feel that way if you're just looking at posted jobs, but if you include all the hidden job market in that, which you should, and you should be actively looking there, those are where the good jobs are. That's where it's easy to get in. That's where things like work gaps, job hopping, all those kinds of issues don't matter. People aren't tuned into that stuff. All they care about is what you're saying and how enthusiastic you are and how professional you are when you reach out to them. It's a different ball game. So
Yeah.
it's definitely worth your while to check that out.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've answered all of the questions that have come through in the chat. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
a
awesome.
good place for us to wrap up for today. But to just kind of put a bow on that final comment about networking and the hidden job market, job searching is a very strategic game. If you are not strategic about it, if you're just applying to everything you see, you're not tailoring your resume, you're not contacting people proactively, it's going to be a long process. If you apply some strategy to it, if you identify organizations you want to work with, if you identify people within those organizations, you start contacting them, reaching out to them, you start like proactively deciding what types of certifications or additional trainings you might want to take to increase your skills. All of those things, while it might seem like a commitment at the beginning, will ultimately pay off much quicker than blasting hundreds of applications as quickly as possible and then not hearing back from anyone.
Yeah, especially if you're someone who doesn't fit into these neat little boxes. Maybe you've switched careers a couple of times. Maybe you've worked in a couple of different areas. It's hard to sort of explain, like, oh no, I did some work in the meat packing industry and then I worked over here in construction. It's like it's hard to, if you don't fit in like a nice neat little box, like, oh, I went to school for law and then I apprenticed, in a law office and then I did some, law, in courtroom experience, and then I have my own practice. It's like a nice, neat progression. That would be great. You would probably fit the sort of HR thing perfectly. But for a lot of people that don't have that nice, neat little career trajectory, like a lot of us, you might have to go further afield to this. You might have to go out into the world of networking. So,
Yeah.
and they'll see you for the fine, upstanding candidate with a lot of experience that you are, So this has been great. Thank you to everybody who participated. We had like 60, 70 people here. Thank you for everybody who asked questions, and we got some great, intelligent questions today. We will be back, I believe, in 2 weeks from today.
Yep.
So
March
Abby and I,
17th is the date, folks.
yeah, check out Abby's. She has some stuff where you can go deeper with her to learn about customizing and doing your resume and all that kind of stuff. She had posted the links. I think I'm staring at one right here, so I'll put that back on the screen. But those are in the in the chat, there are links. If you're watching this on her channel, I'm sure she has it in the description. If you're watching it on my channel, I have some courses and stuff for how to get hired, how to do networking for introverts, stuff like that. So check those out. And I guess unless Abby has anything else,
yeah, I just put in the chat, if you want to work together, send me an email. I put my email in the chat. I offer applicant material review sessions where I can review your resume, your cover letter, and we can tailor it specifically to a job that you're applying to. My most popular session is my interview strategy sessions. And this is where we can not only discuss your overall job search strategy or even diagnose what might be going wrong in your interviews to make you not move forward in the process, but then actually strategize for an upcoming interview. So
if someone wants to just take one session just to kind of give everything they're doing a once over, you offer that too, right? They can just take like one session.
Yep. And that's usually what I do. I usually work with people one time to do an interview strategy session or one time to do an application material review session. And that's enough value for them to feel like they have a direction and the confidence to move forward in the process. And I usually will get some follow-ups where people say, like, if we hadn't had this session, I wouldn't have been prepared for this upcoming interview. And then I wouldn't have made it to the next round. I've been hired, all these really great testimonials. So if you do feel like you need some additional support, please let me know. I'd love to work together.
Yeah. If you've been doing stuff for a while, like you've been doing, you've been searching for a while, like month after month after month, and it really isn't going anywhere fast, maybe it would make sense to get some sort of tailored, customized help for you. Get someone to give everything you're doing, your interview technique or your resumes or your application, just a once over. Make sure that there isn't anything on there that you're not seeing that's counting against you.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. So we will be back in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.